Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield, with a mission to address health inequities by building up communities and breaking down health barriers. Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield, everybody benefits. More at excellusbcbs.com.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made in an aging building, one that was bustling in the 1980s, but stands largely empty today. Some of the windows are broken. On summer weekends, kids break in and mess around. The building is a shell made even sadder by the memories of what it used to mean for the neighborhood and for the city. Can you envision which building I'm talking about? The reality is that this description could be made in countless places, in countless cities. Rochester is like so many cities, large and small, trying to figure out what to do about it, or to borrow a phrase, how to turn blight into beauty. Next week brings an inaugural event called the Revitalize and Innovate Symposium. Attending will be developers, along with local and national leaders. The event focuses on this question: how do we build vibrant, inclusive, and economically resilient communities? It helps to be able to point to cities that have been successful, or at least neighborhoods where different ideas have worked. And it turns out there are plenty of examples, from Cleveland to Buffalo to right here in Rochester. But every American city needs more of it. As industries and jobs evolve, cities are facing big challenges in reinventing. So this hour we explore what's working, what's not, why it's always a complicated question, probably more complicated than the public realizes. There's a lot here, and I want to welcome our guests. In studio, Melissa Stukadolski is president of USC Builds, which is hosting next week's symposium. Welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much, Evan. Appreciate the opportunity.
And Craig Jensen is with us, president. I don't know if I just promoted you. He's a partner. I might have demoted him. He's a partner at CJS Architects. He's a member of the American Institute of Architects. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Evan.
And Melissa, before we even jump into some of the themes here, which I think are going to be really relevant for everybody, there's still space to attend this symposium, and this is the inaugural. Tell people about what's coming up here.
Yeah, we're really excited to bring this to Rochester. And next Wednesday and Thursday, we have a day and a half event, basically. So on Wednesday from 4 to 8 p.m., we're doing a happy hour with a Jazz Fest theme to it, where we connect and network with individuals from other markets as well as from Rochester who are critical stakeholders and change makers. We're going to have everyone that attends gets a Jazz Fest pass to be able to go and check out all the venues and that amazing engagement and opportunity. And then the next day, it's a full day. From 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and that's going to be at the Strong and the Strong Museum of Play. And we are going to have 3 different panels that are going to have varying topics, from placemaking strategies, community engagement, and strategic partnerships. And then we have a keynote speaker, which is the former mayor of D.C., Anthony Williams, who is a legend. He was responsible for bringing the Nationals to downtown Washington, D.C., and in so doing created one of the most transformational revitalization projects in that market. And he did so as someone who didn't have a lot of partnerships, but he created partnerships. And so now more than ever, we need to understand how to bridge the aisle and partner with non-traditional partners and get things done.
How do people attend if they want to?
So we do have an Eventbrite link, which we're happy to share out.
We'll put it in our show notes for this program too. Yep.
That would be great. So yeah, we have an opportunity on Eventbrite. You can purchase tickets for either day or both days. And we just encourage, we don't want financial limitations to be an issue. And so if there is a financial limitation and people can't pay the cover, we want you at the event. So if that's the case, we just ask that you email Joe, J-O, at uscbuilds.com, and we will work with you to make sure that you have access, because equity is important.
There's a lot of places we could start this, but I want to start with a question for Craig, who wrote a piece a couple of years ago as Rochester was seeing this transformation of what a lot of people now call the neighborhood of play. And as the final pieces of the neighborhood come together, with the completion of the museum's Digital Worlds expansion and Indus Hospitality's newest hotel, the third piece, Konar Properties Mixed Use Vita Development, finished in 2022. But you were focusing more on the creation of a neighborhood, not just one building or one repurpose. And whenever I go around, Megan's heard me say this like a million times, every time I go around that area, I'm just amazed at how beautiful it is, how dynamic the space is. You don't really have straight lines. Everything it just feels like a cool, awesome place to be with so much going on. Why focus on the neighborhood instead of an anchor or one space, one building?
We knew that the museum could do a lot on its own, but when they had the opportunity to add other uses to the site, because the site was bigger than they needed, there was a recognition that those other uses would make them stronger. So I think the idea of partnering with other uses that wouldn't be competitive, but would be actually additive, there'd be a synergy between these uses, became a really great idea for the museum. And the other development partners that we found felt the same way. So they saw that their projects could be better if they partnered with someone else who had different expertise, different use, different mission, but together you could make a neighborhood, whereas none of those users could really make a neighborhood on their own. So for us, it was a great opportunity to do way more than just our original client, which was the museum. We'd worked with Konar before elsewhere, but brought them in, and the museum brought Indus in, and it was a great partnership.
I wish I could be critical. I can't. I mean, it sounds like a love note to this project, but I was like probably a lot of parents who, my son is 13 now, and when he was of addicted to the Strong Museum age, I was there all the time. And even he went to school there when he was 3. So we were there all the time. But that was 10 years ago. And then, and at some point, I don't remember the last parent-child visit that we had before he was like on to other things or sports or whatever. But it happened at some point. So it went years went by before I was back even in that area. And I had to drop him off at one of the locations out there. And I'm like driving by. And I was going like, I don't even recognize this. I can't even believe what I'm seeing. And I live in Rochester. I just hadn't seen it. And so I got to see the before and the after with nothing in between. And just for me, it was inspiring to see what the entire neighborhood looked like, how vibrant it felt. There was a bar that I went to with a friend who they actually opened what looks like a garage door. Like, so you're open to the open summer air, and there's so many great spaces down there. So number one, kudos. But number two, does this to you strike you as a kind of, proof of concept that this can work, that entire neighborhoods can be reimagined?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, we did an expansion for the museum back in 2006, which was really successful from the museum standpoint because they increased their attendance. It was well received. It was all great. But like you said, there was no reason to go there unless you were going to the museum.
That was always right to the museum,
so
right to the parking lot.
That was it. You went to the parking lot, you went to the museum, you're done. And they were bordered by the inner loop. There were, large parking lots. There was really no ability to interact with the community. So this was a great opportunity. And yeah, I think there are other opportunities, though, in Rochester, I think, to create partnerships where you could do similar things and leverage one project against another or with another to make a bigger, better community than just a standalone single use, for a developer or institution.
Well, so now a cynic might say, you've got this National Museum as an anchor. And Melissa talked about DC that has revitalized the neighborhood, but used the Washington Nationals as an anchor. And the question may become, and this is really for both of you, what if you don't have an anchor? What if you don't have a strong museum? What if you don't have a new sports stadium? Can you be as successful doing this, do you think, Craig?
I mean, there are other anchors. We might not think of them the same way, but I mean, Eastman School of Music downtown is an anchor, right? So there's a parcel across the street from Eastman School that was acquired by the city and then by the university back in the 80s and then subsequently by the university that is ripe for development, right? Is there a way to leverage both the uses that the university might need with other uses that the neighborhood or city might need and create a project? Other universities have done things like that where they've taken a site that they can't develop fully, but how can they be the anchor for a larger development that brings other uses to the area? I mean, the river's the same way. We're all looking at the river. Can the river be an anchor, right, for inspiring development along the river? It's not a user, but it's a use, or it's an attractor.
I was just going to add that sometimes use of space can be an anchor, right? So if you look at Parcel 5 downtown, for example, there was not a lot happening down there until there was the intentionality around creating opportunity and experience. And that's part of the placemaking strategy as well, is how do we convene people in a group setting, share something that's of interest to them, and create a stickiness effect where they want to be here and they want everyone to be here to share that experience. So I think there's lots. I think it just involves a level of innovation and thinking differently, and that is truly the hope of the symposium, is to inspire us to challenge our norms and our traditional ways of thinking and looking at things from a non-traditional lens.
Well, I mean, you live anywhere and long enough, and you go through these eras where big things are changing. And 20 years ago, Rochester was talking a lot about this fast ferry, and now, if you haven't lived here, for more than 15 years, you probably never heard of it. 10 years ago, there was all this talk about what do we do with Parcel 5. I remember countless shows in my first year, like, what is going to happen on this? And there were some really interesting people with some really interesting ideas on what to do. There were kind of 4 finalists and contenders. There was green space. There were brownstones, different ideas from really smart people. In general, do you want to weigh in? I mean, are you satisfied with what you're seeing down there now?
Absolutely. They had me when they had the French acrobatics happening from air balloons, right? Like the ingenuity and kudos to the collaboration in our community, but both from the city, from the county, from Rochester Downtown Development Corporation. Like, they have the vision and they carry the vision forward and they inspire others by their example. I want to be down there. Just a space where you have food trucks, you have everything for all ages, you have free entertainment. It's family friendly, but it's also a fun place for adults and a party atmosphere as well. Like, that's not easy to cultivate and curate. And so, just again, kudos to all involved in setting that bar really high.
Craig, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I generally agree. I think it's the kind of anchor that should inspire developers to come and do more around that area. I mean, it's difficult because most of the older buildings there are either in the process of or already have been repurposed, and new construction costs make it sometimes prohibitive for market rate housing to work. And that's one of the challenges we have here. Even though there may be demand, it may be hard to make the numbers work for certain developers unless it's a historic tax credit project, or maybe there's some funding available through like HCR for affordable housing or something like that. But market rate housing is still a challenge. The VITA project, was generally market rate. There's affordable units there, but they did it without very much support, which is even tougher now after the pandemic, and things cost more.
If can I just add that one of the things I just recently heard from 2 of our largest employers, both URMC and also Rochester Regional Health, is it's really an employment issue as well, right? That the lack of market rate housing and the lack of inventory on for sale housing is an impediment when they're trying to recruit from other markets and bring healthcare professionals to our community. So we've moved the needle tremendously, and to the city's credit, by being really inventive with different financing mechanisms. But we've moved the needle on affordable housing, but from the market rate perspective, it remains a challenge because you often have huge gaps in the capital stack and in the financing of these projects that are really difficult to overcome without subsidy. So that's one of the other hopes of the symposium, is how are other markets handling this and tackling this, and what unique financing mechanisms can be triggered in order to support the development that's necessary.
Let me just follow up that point a little bit on what's available for housing, because it is obviously an important point for employers if you're trying to attract a young and sort of this up-and-coming workforce. They can't find we know that houses are almost impossible. Mm-hmm. If you go to Zillow's heat index, if you all kinds of different metrics, Rochester is and this region is one of the hardest places to be for a buyer right now in the country. And that's not hyperbole. I mean, there was something like 10 times more available houses for sale at this point in June 10 years ago than today. So it's a big problem, and we know we've had conversations about how to sort of restart and kind of turbocharge building, and why it's so tough to get building done, and what policies and what government has to do about that. But on the apartment side, the conventional wisdom is, well, we've got too much market rate housing. We've got too many apartments. We don't need more apartments. You seem to be indicating otherwise.
Well, I think that the times have changed, in the fact that we have an increase in large corporations coming downtown. So Constellation headquarters, for example, there's 350 people that will be added to that are I love the phrase that was coined yesterday, urban pioneers, right? They want to live in urban centers, and they are also of means to be able to afford market rate housing. And my understanding is most of the market rate housing, if not all, is currently waitlisted. So the demand is there. The other thing that I would say is on the for sale side, there's a tremendous opportunity because the largest population right now is a senior population, the largest growing population in our community in Monroe County. And there is a tremendous amount in the research we've done in our Bull's Head Revitalization Project. We have a large volume of seniors that are staying in single family homes that they no longer can maintain because they want to stay in the neighborhood. They've been in the neighborhood for 50 years. So part of our development strategy is, can we develop an aging in place model which allows those seniors to remain in the neighborhood they love and cherish, but also create some housing that is supportive in nature as they continue to age, but gives them the maintenance of independence, and then also frees up that housing inventory for other families that might be, of interest to purchase. So unlocking inventory through those types of non-traditional pathways.
Well, this is where it strikes me that all this talk about walkability is not just a slogan, that this is something that older, maybe retired folks would definitely want. If you're going to move out of a house, and then you want an apartment, you want to be able to do a lot of different things within your day, within a neighborhood or a district that you're living in. Yeah. Obviously, if you're a younger parent, you want to be able to walk to the Strong Museum, but maybe you want to meet a friend for a beer afterwards. And you can do all those things in Vida now. You can do all those things in. Did we still say the neighborhood of play?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
I'm still using the proper terminology.
Still good.
But how much then, Craig, is walkability at the center of designing a neighborhood like that?
It's a challenge in Rochester because it's super important, but we also have this auto dependency.
I know.
Because our downtown is still not fully self-sufficient, right? So, in many cities that are a little larger than us with more transit options and higher densities, and more residents living downtown, you can not own a car or use a car very rarely. Like the majority of your trips would be on foot, and maybe there's an infrequent number of trips that you need a car. And we're the exact reverse for most people.
Yeah.
And we've got to get over that, even developing the neighborhood of play, parking was one of the challenges we had to solve, because you want to make a pedestrian-oriented public realm that feels great. You don't want to be walking past parking lots all the time. And so where do the cars go? Because there is a demand for that. It's part of the package you need to provide right now, and it's a challenge. But I think, for good or bad, there's a lot of parking lots downtown still. They're really disruptive to the public realm, and they are a real distraction or detraction. But I don't think it's necessarily what's holding us back right now, from further development.
I would just add to that the city of Rochester and the level of intentionality that they are attracting or directing on this subject is really important. So in the Bull's Head Revitalization Project for the last 4 years, we've been working on development planning, and we've been working in lockstep with the city, who's invested an exorbitant amount of money in trying to solve the micromobility issue. The fact that people don't have transportation in that neighborhood, but it's not safe for them to get around. And so their investment has been around solving the micromobility issue, creating additional bike paths, widening roads to accommodate sidewalks as needed, to accommodate the mass transit stops as needed. And it's really with the intention of the connectivity that's necessary to make the city easier to traverse, whether it's by bike or walk. And I think it's commendable, the vision for future development, and you're starting to see us solve for that problem. And then as we're revitalizing various areas, I think if we bring intentionality to that, the connectivity will eventually solve itself.
So we've been talking about the neighborhood of play. Paint a picture of Bull's Head for people.
Yeah, so Bull's Head is a 12-acre development that we've been working on with the city of Rochester. We were competitively selected back in 2021. And really at the heart of that is HEART, the acronym HEART. So we're developing the community, and it is community-driven, with the acronym HEART, which stands for Health, Education, Arts, Recreation, and Technology. And really at the heart of that placemaking strategy is driving intention around what the community needs in critical services, what the community needs to be additive to quality of life, and then also just focusing on a social impact. We have a neighborhood that has seen disinvestment for decades, almost 40, 50 years now, and they've been waiting patiently, and they need investment. And so how do we drive that level of energy and create a catalytic development? So we're doing that by workforce development initiatives, which are providing construction trades training. We're doing that by really innovative groups such as hydroponic farming as a prospective tenant. We're doing that through childcare access because it's a childcare desert. We're doing that through addressing critical food needs, attracting a grocer that provides healthy food sources because it's a food desert. So it started by community outreach, gaining an understanding of what the neighbors and the community really want and need, and investing in those relationships authentically to really understand what would be additive to that neighborhood, and then starting the development from that perspective. So it's so much more than just building the buildings. And it's been years in development and having the conversations and gaining the knowledge to truly understand what will be truly transformative.
How's it going?
It's going great. We have 2 projects that we are going to be bringing forward that are activating. Number one, thank you to ESL, the most incredible community-focused partner we could ever ask for. They broke ground in the fall on their project, and we are excited that this fall they will be opening that branch. So they are our first development activation in that neighborhood, and a critical service needed for financial needs for the neighbors. And then we have some other exciting projects which we will be announcing very soon. Our hope is to have our next community touch point, which would be a public community meeting in late July. So we have some important announcements to make, but we wanted to make sure that we honored the need to show action, because there's been a lot of talk for many years and people have heard the talk, but they need to see results.
We're talking about the upcoming 2025, the inaugural Revitalize and Innovate Symposium. And Melissa Sukadolski, who's president of USC Builds, is there. They are hosting the symposium. They would love to see you there. And we're talking about some of the themes that are going to be addressed there. Craig Jensen is also with us. President, I keep saying president. Okay. He's a partner at CJS Architects and a member of the American Institute of Architects. And I got a nice note, by the way, from a listener named Joel, who wanted to say he's glad you've got Craig on the program. He was willing nearly 30 years ago to offer his time to help save the Madison Hotel. He earned a great deal of respect. In any case, the Madison Hotel was to be an anchor to the neighborhood. It did not end up that way, but there's been a lot of development and adaptive reuse in this neighborhood. Does that ring a bell?
Susan B. Anthony neighborhood. Yeah,
Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah, that's a long time ago.
That's such an important and cherished neighborhood in our community, so I'm excited to hear that.
It's a lot of appreciation for Craig's work there. And so let me ask both of you maybe a little bit more broad question. We've been talking about specific projects, but I told both of our guests before the program began that I think the lay public sometimes struggles with how to envision what's going to happen, how to reimagine cities and spaces, because we see Kodak Park and we see places, the old Kodak across the street here. I see a revolving restaurant building in Rochester, which I still don't know what's up there. Does anybody know what's up there? Is anything going on in there?
It's office space right now.
Is anybody up there like spinning around, just like doing office work?
They're not spinning right now, but they're up there, I think.
Okay,
yeah.
like that's like the big thing that I want to know. But I mean, I see all these spaces that we all remember in decades past what they were, and maybe work culture has changed. So it's easy to say, well, just put housing here, just do mixed use here, without understanding that when you are reimagining a space, it's pretty complicated. So can I ask you both about that? Craig, can I start with you? What do you think the public should understand when we talk about all the challenges that are going to go into creating something new out of an existing space, not building new?
Yeah, I think, there are still a lot of old buildings that can be either repurposed or upgraded, or the uses can change. And it's just difficult sometimes to make the numbers work or find the right tenants and make the investment up front, that you are sure will provide the return. I think one thing the city has done that I think will really help is they've created this West Main Street Historic District, right? So a lot of small buildings on West Main that are historic that could benefit from historic tax credits. It's a complicated process to do for a small building or a smaller developer. And by the city creating that historic district, it's going to make it a lot easier for those individual owners to invest in their buildings and potentially get historic tax credits and make the numbers work. If they didn't do that larger historic district, everybody's got to do it on their own. It's more cumbersome, more costly. So, that's a bigger vision the city has to help make things happen. Now, what those uses will be, we don't know. Every developer can make their own decisions. Hopefully it's a mix. When Constellation went into the aqueduct, the original thought was that building would be residential mixed use, right? Mm-hmm. And that was thought to be the right solution. But when Constellation showed interest, that became, well, this is an obvious, thing that the city needs to have back in downtown, and the residential can wait. So other buildings now will be repurposed residential instead of aqueduct, and the mix of that office plus the residential will be a win-win. So it's, you never know what one building is going to need, but hopefully over the course of all these developments, it'll balance out.
So the dynamic what you just touched on, Craig, what that took to happen, that Constellation project, was leadership. And in Rob Sands, you found that. Rob Sands has been the most incredible supporter of our community, has been on the chamber board for the last 10 years, and was also someone who really was promoting the creation of One Rock. So One Rock being a collaboration between city, state, county, and other philanthropic foundations in order to make funds available to help these development projects where those critical gaps existed in financing. And in this historic corridor, West Main Street Corridor Initiative, One Rock is now making funds available by grant to the community. So any individual that owns property that needs to update the property, anyone that wants to acquire a building, anyone that needs to adapt spaces for varied uses, there's money available by grant by way of One Rock. And that's a vehicle that did not exist up till a couple of years ago. So I'm really proud of our city. I'm proud of the innovation. I'm proud of the leadership. And I'm proud of people making commitments to reinvest in our city, because it takes the constellations to make that commitment, to come from Victor, from our suburbs, no diss to Victor, I love Victor, but to come from Victor to downtown and to be a visionary and a pioneer, because there's a lot of interloop work and 490 work that has to happen. And so they're currently immersed in a really uncomfortable environment while all of that is getting done, but they had the vision to lead. And that is what we need.
We had Ken Glazer on this program recently, just talking briefly, and we would like to follow up with this, and on his desire to see more of that, more companies willing to move downtown. And I don't think Ken would say as an act of charity for a city. I mean, almost no one has the means to do it as an act of charity, but to do it as an act of civic responsibility if it makes sense for you, being open-minded to finding the right spaces, the right solutions that are good for you, but also good for the city. I hope, Ken, I'm summing you up pretty well there. Constellation is something that a lot of people are pointing to. Do we have more space? Can there be more constellations happening, you think?
Absolutely. And in fact, I'm walking the talk myself. So I'm moving my business from Brighton, 150 employee business, to the Bull's Head neighborhood. We will be one of those catalytic projects because we believe in it and because we want to invest in the city that's been so, responsible. So there are spaces. You can drive around the city and still see properties that need investment. And thankfully, we do have a lot of really amazing leaders. Buckingham, Reedman, Andy Galena. There are many proud and people that love our community. They're not just doing it for financial gain. They are investing in things that most people would run away from. They're running toward it. And so I just commend their leadership. I commend their personal and financial commitments. And I think there's lots of opportunities and spaces for other businesses. And I encourage other businesses that are listening to consider it and truly explore those opportunities.
Craig, you want to add to that?
No, I think that's well put. I think there are opportunities out there. And, if a business would show interest in coming downtown, I'm sure the city would help them to the nth degree to figure out how to make it happen. So I don't think that people should be shy. And the more businesses that come downtown, it's just going to reinforce the demand for housing, and it'll be a cyclical kind of situation where, the demand will then drive the other demand and vice versa, which will be great.
And beyond the city, I just would add the county, the state, their Empire State Development. There are so many critical actors and partners in this public realm that get it and that really want to provide resources in order to make these revitalization projects possible.
One other point on this before we take our only break, and then we're going to kind of dig more into what the panels are going to be talking about next week at the symposium. Craig, you mentioned before the program began that sometimes we get fixated on the big project, and sometimes for good reason. For a long time it was, what are you going to do with the Kodak spaces, and can you be successful with that? But take me through a little bit of your thoughts on smaller projects versus bigger, and being willing to celebrate those smaller wins, those smaller projects.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I mean, years ago, our firm did a series of projects, 7 or 8 projects in the Grove Place neighborhood. And when we started, there was no real Grove Place neighborhood, So over the course of maybe 25 years or more, we've built 30 or 40 townhouses there. Each one of these projects was so small that it didn't even move the needle, right? But now people go there and are like, wow, this is a great neighborhood. what happened here, this wasn't some big idea. This was like an organic evolution of a neighborhood that just with people who cared and wanted to live there, a few people at a time. So it still made a big dent, I think, now, because it's a place people look to and say, can we do more of that? But it wasn't a big vision or some big project with all kinds of money thrown at it, but it still works. It's still successful.
How do you feel about the sort of the big versus small dynamic on what we focus on here?
I think they both have to happen in order to reach the scale of impact that we want to see for our city. But I just am so grateful for all of those community change makers, because the revolution does start with just one, right? And finding, there's a gentleman, I'm going to call him out and celebrate him, John DeMott, who has lived in the Bull's Head neighborhood for greater than 50 years. And he is just an extraordinary individual that everyone knows and everyone goes to. And he's helping businesses, he's helping families, and he's helping others find a way to invest in Bull's Head. And that's one individual who just has a passion for the smaller projects to happen. And because of his vision and his level of care, like he has a really compelling narrative that people want to care about. So it takes a village.
Listeners, if you want to join in and learn more not only about what we're discussing, but maybe be part of the conversation next week at the symposium, they would love to see you there. The Revitalize and Innovate Symposium, the inaugural one, is taking place June 25th and 26th. And we'll tell you a little bit more in our second half hour about that. We're going to come back in just a moment and with some more of your feedback. For Melissa Sukadolski, president of USC Builds, which is hosting next week's symposium. Craig Jensen is here. He's a partner at CJS Architects and a member of the American Institute of Architects. And we'll come right back with them on Connections.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson. Believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Patrick says, Patrick is thinking about Rochester, which sometimes shows up on the list with cities like Buffalo. I've seen Duluth, Minnesota. I've seen others in sort of the Midwest, the Northeast, as possible climate refugee cities in the future for the next 50, 100 years. And he says, as people decide they don't want to be around hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, it would be smart to have more housing stock, he says. Turn some of those high rises into condos. We just need more of those. Sprinkle the neighborhoods where ownership can be tied into all the different city neighborhoods, but in a smaller footprint at lower cost. So that's Patrick, who is a smart guy, but not an architect. And it's a nice idea. How feasible is that thinking here, Craig?
Well, I personally like the climate in Rochester, so, I'm not necessarily a refugee, but I could see how over time our area might be thought to be a more desirable place from the standpoint of either climate or cost. And we can build pretty resilient structures here that are extremely energy efficient, and make them extremely green in that regard, maybe more so than in some other areas where you've got heat indexes that are really high. So it's an opportunity for us, I think, as a city.
You mentioned some energy efficiency. And again, one of the probably pieces of conventional wisdom is that makes housing or projects more expensive. And I think you're kind of saying otherwise, that we can do things cost effectively and be prepared for whatever is changing.
Yeah, I think it does make projects more expensive, but the payback over time justifies that. Yeah. And I still think it's the right thing to do from a sustainability perspective. So if you look at the long-term return on the project, it's where we need to go. The idea of building zero-emission homes, that are all electric, it's totally possible now. We should be doing that.
Anything you want to add there?
So my background's in construction as well. So for 24 years, I've been in this market, and I agree. I think that there's tremendous subsidies available to help with the affordability of building in green new technologies. I also think there's tremendous workforce development opportunities around teaching to these green new standards. And then the other piece, just going back to Patrick, I want to highlight is also the availability of natural resources. The most important natural resource to humans is water. And the abundance of water that we have in this region is really appealing to a lot of industries. And I know that is one of the attractors that we have. And the Four Seasons, I think, is compelling. Not a lot of markets have Four Seasons. And so I do think that there's an audience there that wants to experience what life can offer for Four Seasons.
Sarah says, might be off topic, but wants to know if the guests can comment on how difficult it is to build up neighborhoods that don't have grocery stores. That's been a debate in Rochester. We saw, Harts was a thing for a bit, and then it went away. And then there's Constantino's and different ideas in different places. Melissa, you're working on Bull's Head.
Yeah, so it's from an equity perspective, it's one of the things that we're most concerned about is the proximity of fresh, healthy foods, because the absence of those things means that people are shopping in corner stores and bodegas, and that there's just not the abundance and options and variety of healthy options there. And no disrespect to our bodegas, they provide essential services to our neighborhoods, but we need broader offerings in order for families to be sustained in healthy ways. So I agree, it's a critical concern, and I think with lack of transportation in some of our center city kind of neighborhoods, then we have to think about it and we have to plan for it.
You want to add to that?
I guess I would just say that, there's a lot of suburban developments that are pretty remote from grocery stores. So for market rate housing where the person is likely to have a vehicle, it's probably not an issue, except it really restricts our ability to create density, which is a real problem in a pedestrian-oriented downtown. For people who don't have the economic means to maintain their own vehicle, then it becomes much more of a problem. I would definitely hope that we're going to get to a point soon where there will be, food options, grocery stores downtown. That would be great. And, Hart's unfortunately did not survive. Maybe if it was there now, it would have a better chance. Even,
you kind of wonder, given what's going on there.
Yeah. But we don't know. We'll find out with the next one, hopefully.
Looking ahead to the symposium next week, I'm just going to mention what some of the panels are focused on, and then we're going to talk about some of the issues here. And I was glad that Melissa sent some notes on where things are going pretty well in other places, because I think it's always helpful to know if we are trying to scale a mountain and it feels really, really difficult to reimagine spaces or figure out what to do with empty offices or what have you, that there are plenty of cities doing the same thing. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Panel 1 next week is on From Vacancy to Vibrancy, Placemaking Strategies for Reclaiming Underutilized Properties. Big theme here. 2 is Neighbors at the Table, Deepening Community Engagement in Development, obviously important. And 3, From Mission to Momentum, How Anchor Institutions Are Powering Community Development. So it's a lot of what we've been talking about here. Are you able to talk a little bit about Thrive on King, Salt City Market?
Yeah,
can we talk about those?
Absolutely.
So first of all, right next door in Syracuse, Salt City Market. What's going on there?
So Salt City Market has just done an incredible job with varied uses. So they have programmatically really diversified approach, which has taken an underutilized property, and they've added all types of amenities similar to what we're talking about with Vita. And Neighborhood of Play. And so we have this developer coming. I don't want to tell too much about their story, but they're coming to talk about their intentionality around what community services were needed and the amount of engagement that they had with the community in advance of that development and identifying what those critical services are. So they're on panel 2. They could easily be on panel 1 From Vacancy to Vibrancy, but we put them on panel 2 because the level of intentionality around community engagement is really best in class.
And I would say that the quality of the Salt City Market is really exceptional. If you haven't been there, it's worth a trip to Syracuse just to go there. It's really great.
That's a big endorsement.
No, it's great. We did a similar project, although not the same scale, in Buffalo. But the one in Syracuse is great. It's really worth the trip.
In Cleveland, where I'm from, I don't know this story, and I don't even know how to pronounce it. The vitrolite.
Vitriol, yeah.
Vitrolite. Okay.
Vitrolite, yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
That's in Cleveland. So
Yeah.
what's going on there?
So this is a women's-led entrepreneur developer who had a cycling business and invested in a community that most people didn't want to go to, and had the vision for what that community could hold, and started their renting real estate for her cycling business. As her business expanded and post-COVID, decided to really lean in on risk and bought the property, and has since created just a very vibrant, health-driven placemaking strategy, which also had just a different level of community engagement and identifying like what are the services that the community wants, but also having the vision for not what the current occupants were and what their needs were, but what she knew that the future trends would indicate, and really built a beautiful project. And it's a historic renovation as well. So just an absolutely stunning building that has just new life based on her level of ingenuity and her investment.
That's what I have to check out. And in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Thrive on King.
So Thrive on King is actually the inspiration for this entire symposium. I was attracted to Thrive on King because of the work that we're doing in Bull's Head. And my dear friend Simeon Bannister from Rochester Community Foundation said, you have to see this project. And so we went to Milwaukee, and the team was so gracious. So at the heart of this development is a public-private partnership, and also the level of strategic partners among the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, who became just an anchor investor, and without their level of commitment, the project would have really had challenges. There's 13 different sources and uses on the financial capital stack for this project, so very complex. It came together during COVID, and it has not just a focus on improving health outcomes in a disinvested, underutilized, economically disadvantaged community, but they're improving educational outcomes. When it came to affordable housing, they did a set aside for medical students that made a commitment to serve in tough communities. If they'd made that investment in their career path, then there was financial support on the housing in order for them to live in those communities. So it's just a different level of innovation and care that they brought to this process, and created community-driven spaces that are allowable and free and safe for everyone to enjoy, which it's transformative. They took an old Kimball's department store, so it's built in the early 20th century, and they converted it just beautifully. They maintained the historic integrity and the beauty, but they also added cultural, culture and art in such amazing ways that it really feels modern.
So there's some examples, and then I'm sure they'll be talking about next week, but certainly things to look up, or maybe a road trip to Salt City, Craig says. So I just want to put those on your map for you. And I want to go back to Cleveland for a second and just ask both of you a question. So my father turned 61 in 2006, and he had to retire from his law firm, where he worked downtown in Cleveland forever. But he didn't want to retire. He just couldn't imagine retiring. So they put him in charge of basically some projects, gave him some things to do, including finding a new home for the firm, and found, a beautiful building that needed a lot of love. And they spent years preparing it. And by the time they opened it in 2012, 13 maybe, he was very, very proud of it. But he said he was already starting to hear from, prospective young attorneys, I don't know if I want to work in an office. They're going, this was a lot of work to find this beautiful new space that we thought would be the attractor. And instead, it's great, but, the culture of work is changing. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the pandemic hits, and that has accelerated more remote work. Although what I want to ask you both is, are we on the other side of... There's always going to be remote work, and there's always going to be people now in our digital world who want to work remotely. And probably young workers will have a lot to say about driving that conversation. And I don't claim to be a young worker, so I get that. But what I wonder is, can you still have that anchored space, that physical office space, and can you exist in a way that that's still attractive to a workforce that says, I think I can do this at home? I mean, that worries me. His experience with that concerns me for the future of redevelopment space, if the workforce is going to be, and I know there's a lot of privilege with working remotely, and it's not everyone can, but more and more people want to work remotely. What do you think?
So my lived experience as an employer, we have an open kind of model in the sense that, it's definitely, it's beyond hybrid in the sense of, I want you working in the most optimal space to get the better outcomes, right? And I feel like what people want, young workers, older workers, all workers, period, is options. They want the option to be flexible when they need to, and they want to know they have a safe, lovely place to plug into when they need to. And so I think Constellation put this really well in a conference call. They recently just talked about the importance of creating space that is absolutely beautiful and accommodating in a way that it entices people to want to be there. And so it's not mandate driven. It's driven by creating an inviting space. They call it Sparkles and Bubbles, which I love. Given their brand, obviously. But creating the sparkles and bubbles that really are attractors to people wanting to be in that environment. I think in order to have high levels of collaboration, there needs to at times be physical interaction. I don't think you can get the same in a completely virtual environment or a completely remote environment. I do believe collaboration requires proximity. And in my own example, even though I give that optionality, everyone's in the office every single day. And I'm actually out of office spaces. So part of the reason we're moving is we've grown at such a robust place where people are like, I really want to be in the office, but I don't have the space to be there.
That's interesting.
So my choice was driven by demand for physical space. And my average age of my staff is 36 years old. As opposed to other construction companies that are 55 years is the average age. So very young audience and very diverse team.
Wow, that's encouraging. Anything you want to add there, Craig?
Only that, we also try and provide a really nice environment for our employees and try and make it an attractive place to be. I think the fact that we are downtown and, in a place that maybe has other things to offer in addition to just our office makes it additionally compelling. I think if you're maybe in an office park environment, not to just, it may not be as compelling to go into the office every day if it's really just a desk, in a kind of undifferentiated space. The more exciting those workplaces can be, the better. And I think you do need that collaborative kind of environment. For certain businesses like ours, it really makes us work much better. So I would hope that it doesn't change too much, but flexibility is important. And we have people that need to be away from the office for whatever reason to, get their kid off the bus or whatever. And that's fine.
No, I mean, I'm guilty is the wrong word. I do a ton of work outside of this office. I mean, of course, that has to happen. And I spend less time in this office than I did before the pandemic. But I also love being here because I love Rob Braden. I love you, Rob. I know. I don't say it enough. But I also love being able to walk next door and get a coffee. I love the Pont de Rennes Bridge. I love being outside on warm days and even working outside. But it takes that walkable neighborhood for me to want to spend extra hours here when I could be working and writing at home. So to the point that Craig made, even about the neighborhood of play, that element of not just an office park, not just a big slab parking lot in an office park, really matters. It matters to me. I'm sure it matters to a lot of workers. I'm encouraged that you had demand for it. So I think that's a healthy thing. So as we get ready to wrap up here, just a few more minutes here, what else is exciting to you? When you think ahead to next week here, you got a lot going on with these 3 panels here. What do you want the audience to know about what's coming?
I really am looking for a really diverse group in the audience that represents all the cross sections of our amazing community that can be engaged in the conversation, because I think the conversation can't be held in closed doors with architects and construction teams and developers. I think the conversation needs to be broadened and inclusive, and the doors need to be swung wide open to include the community in contemplating what they want to see in their neighborhoods. And if we're going to move the needle on that, we need people to show up. So we have all these great development projects and people coming from all over the country who've never been to Rochester. The most important thing I want them to feel is Jazz Fest, because to me, Jazz Fest in Rochester it's one of the most amazing parts of our experience that I want to share with them. The other part of that is I want them to meet the people, because at the end of the day, what I'm so passionate about is the community that we have and the amazing people in this community. And so I really want to create connectivity, and I want to showcase Rochester at its best. So I need your audience to show up, and that's how we do it. We need representation of what makes Rochester best.
Who are the right kind of workers and thinkers that should be there next week?
It's tough to answer this question. My mother asked me this question, and everybody would think that it's, well, I need other developers there, or I need other finance people, or yes, I need those people. I need policymakers, but I also need retired grandmothers, and I need unemployed individuals seeking job opportunities, and I need educational leaders and teachers. I need people from churches. I need a broad swath of the community, because if we want to get creative about the community, we have to have everybody's voice present. And the other thing I'm excited about that I want to mention is with Rochester Downtown Development Corporation and One Rock have agreed after the end of this symposium to have the conversation continue. So their commitment is to create a roundtable series that allows us to synthesize the amazing ideas that we hear and figure out as a collective community, how do we adapt those great ideas in a way that is impactful in Rochester? So how do we make that rubber meet the road? And how do we engage those best practices and adapt them in ways that will be feasible for our community? That's the important work. This is not where the work begins and ends. This is the catalyst. This is to kind of strike the match. But we have to walk the walk forward, and we need the community engagement in order to do that.
Well, the symposium is next Wednesday and Thursday. The Revitalize and Innovate Symposium is happening where, Melissa?
So the very first day, Wednesday, will be at 10 Winthrop Street. It's the RDG offices. They've graciously opened their offices to us because it does provide walking access to the Jazz Fest. So we will have open bar. We will have a tremendous amount of amazing food. And then we will have Jazz Fest tickets. So you're able to walk from 4 to 8. It's basically an open house, kind of come and go as you'd like. You have a check-in point and most importantly, a great bathroom. And then the second day, it's at the Strong, the Museum of Play, from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. And we will have food available throughout the day, and we'll have great networking opportunities, but we'll also have our panelists and those important conversations. And then we will most notably have the most amazing former mayor, Anthony Williams, to join us for our keynote at 11 a.m.
It's going to be really cool to see what people not from Rochester say when they go to the neighborhood of Play for the first time. That's going to be fun.
And that's part of our planning intention as well. So all of the events that I talked about are all within walking distance. The point is to park your car on Wednesday and not have to pick it up until Friday. So our guests can walk everywhere. They're going to stay at the hotel right at the neighborhood of Play. Thank you, Indus Hospitality. And they are also going to be able to hit both of the events, and then most importantly, visit the other businesses that surround this amazing Jazz Fest experience that we're so blessed by.
All right, against my better judgment, I'm going to take one more email. This is Roger. We're going to solve this in 30 seconds. He says, "Greetings, Evan and Megan. I'm disheartened to see the condition the Hungerford building is declining into. I always felt if there was loft apartments and condos as well as artist lofts, that could be a successful combination." What's the future of that building going to be? What do you think, Greg?
I mean, I think there's issues with the Hungerford right now, I know, which is unfortunate, but I think there's a bigger issue there. I mean, the public market is another one of these anchors that really can, be the center of a lot of new growth and development and change. Hungerford is right there. The difficulty is connecting those pieces that we have that are super valuable to what's already happened across Main Street and across the tracks at Village Gate and the University Avenue neighborhood. I mean, it's just across the tracks and things should be happening. Yeah.
So a lot of potential there.
Totally.
A lot of potential. Yeah. Craig is a partner at CJS Architects and member of the American Institute of Architects, and a number of people said to me, "You got Craig Jensen. That's a get." This was a get, Craig. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Really great having you. Melissa Sukodelsky, president of USC Builds, and they're hosting next week's symposium. They'd love to see you there. Have a great time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Evan.
And from all of us at Connections, thank you if you're watching on YouTube. Thanks for watching on the WXXI News YouTube. Thanks for listening. We're back with you. Well, let's see. Tomorrow is Juneteenth, and we've got special NPR programming. We're back with you Friday with Congressman Joe Morelli on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.